This year's show is our 12th at the Civic Center, our 12th year. Started. It's hard to believe we've been doing this for 12 years, but Elvis, the way it was, is kind of reminiscent of a lot of his songs and shows that he's done over the years. We're going to be doing a lot of 70s songs, some of those that may not have been as big and popular when he was a big star. That I think that if he would have lived beyond his time, that these songs would have been good. Like one song is Power of My Love, Wearing That Loved On Look. And we'll also be doing the regular medley of his big hits that everybody wants to hear, which is Heartbreak Hotel, Love Me Tender, Jailhouse Rock, all those kinds of songs. I think as a performer, as a tribute artist, you have to do those songs. People come and they want to hear Teddy Bear and Love Me Tender. As a band, and just like as Elvis did, he got kind of tired of singing those songs over and over again and turned a lot of them into medleys. And we kind of do the same thing, because what we're really trying to do is recreate a Elvis concert that he would have done in the 70s primarily. And that's where he did a lot of medleys and he tried a lot of covers. We don't do too many covers, although maybe Johnny Be Good is one. We'll be singing My Way, which is a cover. As everybody knows, those were done by big artists back in the day. And of course, people, when they come and they watch, really what we want to do is we just want to represent Elvis and keep the music and spirit alive. And by doing that, we also bring in some of his humor and his charisma into it. So I hope when people come and watch this show that they're entertained, which we have a pretty good record of doing that. The band behind me is phenomenal, and they really make me do the performance that I feel needs to portray who and what Elvis was. You know, Elvis recorded hundreds and hundreds of songs, and we could probably go on for days and days. Primarily, a lot of his earlier hits were done in the mid to late 50s. All Shook Up, Stuck on You, some of those songs that people are familiar with. When we sit down as a band, of course, every concert has to be a little different, particularly the one here in Greeley at the Civic Center. So we want it to always be fresh. Every big concert that we do here, we want it to kind of stand on its own. We don't want people to come back again and again and say, it's the same show as last year. So that's why every show kind of has a theme. Last year we did honor to law enforcement, and there was fundraising for a nonprofit here in Colorado called COPS, and the money raised was to help families that have lost a loved one or a law enforcement agent in the line of duty. So that was last year. This year we wanted to concentrate more on Elvis and kind of the way it was when he was performing in the 70s. So that's where, like I said earlier, a lot of the songs that we're doing, when we sit down, we look at this, okay, we have to do some of those in the 50s and 60s, but let's really have fun, where there's a really cool groove, a real rock and rollish groove of his music in the 70s. That's a great question, and I love these kind of questions because, you know, Elvis was a believer, and his faith was really strong when he was younger, and it was really molded by back in the day when he was growing up. His influences were rhythm and blues, country, and gospel, primarily black gospel, because of the movement that they had and the beat that they had. And so where he got his sound was the combination of all those three. He would take those old crooner songs and put a different beat on those, and that was his style. That's what solidified him in the genre of rock and roll. So the gospel aspects of it, Elvis usually, if not always, did at least one gospel song in a lot of his concerts. One of those is How Great Thou Art. A lot of times he would end a show or play that in the first half. And of course, a lot of times he ended his show with American Trilogy, which has somewhat of a gospel-y turn to it. But so what we did, we've kind of taken up that cross, if you will. When we first started doing our shows 12 years ago at the Civic Center, we came out and we did primarily gospel, early stuff, and then the second act was all rock and roll. So now what we've done is we still maintain that, except now we kind of spread it around. I typically have 2 costume changes. The second act is typically a jumpsuit of some sort of 70s style, what he would have wore. First part is typically bell bottoms and maybe I guess people would call them pirate shirts, but they were the 70s style puffy sleeve satin shirts. But now we really delve deeper into some of his gospel music, to where a lot of our shows now will have highlight 3 or 4, sometimes 5 gospel songs, and I think we're doing 4, and they're kind of upbeat. You know, some of them are old style, but then we get into one called Saved, which has it just has a great beat to it, a big horn section. I have a big horn section that follow me on these big concerts. So spiritually, I feel really connected with Elvis gospel, and talking with some folks that he knew, that knew Elvis, that are still alive. When I've asked them questions, you know, what would Elvis be doing now if he was still alive? He'd be doing primarily gospel stuff. So because of that, and because of the feeling, and I guess the reaction we get back from the audience, we now do Elvis gospel only concerts. So we have one coming up in the end of February 2020 at the Rialto Theater in Loveland, and that's strictly Elvis gospel. So we'll be doing strictly Elvis gospel music. Well, you know, it's interesting because here at the radio station at Pirate 104.7 FM in Greeley, we play music from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, primarily soft rock 70s and 80s. We are a Christian-based radio station, so we don't have a problem confessing our faith. As far as prayer, you know, we start every performance with prayer in the green room with everybody. And we don't have a problem confessing our faith out on the stage, because that was not only part of me, but it's also part of Elvis. And the people that I've surrounded myself with, the musicians, are all Christian. So it's not out of the ordinary for us to say a little prayer before. It's interesting because I'm in a Bible study now and reading Judges and Luke, and we just read a whole thing, chapter 18 on Luke, about prayer, and to make it consistent. And it also in Judges talks about prayer and believing. So you have to be consistent. And I think a lot of times when we get discouraged or when things are kind of going wrong, it's easy for us as humans to kind of back away from the prayer thing. We start thinking more about ourselves and what's going on, to where our praying should be consistent. I know that I always give thanks when good things happen to me, and I'm sure a lot of people do. But sometimes when things don't go right, sometimes we forget. We're too involved in trying to think about what is the solution to get us out of the situation that we're in, to where in reality our prayer has to be consistent throughout. Good times, not so good times, and bad times. I think so. Prayer for us is just being consistent with it. You know, it's interesting. I first and foremost, I never wanted to be the Elvis guy. I wasn't. I guess my whole life has been a stage. I've always been a little bit mischievous growing up, and doing things where you know, I got in trouble. Nothing bad. I didn't kill anybody yet, but so the assisted living center kind of came about after a karaoke event where I was asked to get up and sing with a bunch of other people, and I said, "No, man, I'm not a singer." But we got up, and of course, after a couple adult beverages, that gave me courage to get up and do some singing. I was looking through the Elvis song list, and so I said, "Well, I know how to sing these because I grew up with my dad's albums." And then that led to a stint with Relay for Life, the cancer folks. And so they came to me and said, "Hey, would you do your Elvis thing for Relay for Life," which is a walk? And I said, "Man, I don't do an Elvis thing, but this is where God kind of puts things in front of you. Next thing I know, I'm doing this Elvis thing." And I thought it was a one and done thing, because it was, to be honest with you, it was really embarrassing for about 30 minutes, you know, to put on fake sideburns and the hair and everything. But something touched me, and what it was other facilities and people reaching out to me saying, "Hey, listen, our residents at our assisted living center or at hospice would like to, would you be willing to come and sing to them?" So grudgingly, I decided to do that, and that has been probably one of the highlights of my life, to be honest with you. I will perform in front of thousands of people, and don't get me wrong, I love it. It's great. People are very kind coming up, and I always make sure I make myself available to them afterwards, where I can thank them for coming. And once again, a lot of our performances are done as a fundraising for either kids in need or a community service of some sort. But it's when I perform at assisted living centers, and I probably do 3 to 5 of those a month, where I go down and I set up a little sound system. I have my band in my phone, the soundtracks, and I talk about Elvis's life, talk about his influences with his mother, his influences with God, his influences with drugs, and relationships as well. And I think I get, it takes me a while really to really understand what I just did. These people. And they're at all different ages, because I do memory care, I do just retirement living centers where people still have a lot of their facilities about them, and then I get into some where they're bound to a bed or a wheelchair, and that is their life. So I get pleasure knowing that I can bring a smile or a positive memory back to them while they're there, realizing that in many cases when I come back to this facility, some of those people may not be there, that they've passed on. So my gratification out of this is knowing that I brought them just a little bit of happiness for that half hour or that hour or however long it is, that they were able to reminisce back in the days when they were youthful and life was good. Oh yeah. For me personally, I've been in. I performed in New York and Houston and Padre Islands, and I've been in a lot of places. The band, not too long ago we were flown out and performed in Baltimore. Of course, Telluride. We do a lot of Colorado stuff with the band. Recently in Grand Junction, we're starting to get a lot of notice, and now that I feel comfortable with where I'm at, particularly with work, it does take some time off, and some of the band members are able to accompany me on some of these. We're branching out and doing more out-of-state gigs, but yeah, you're right. Primarily, we do a lot of Colorado shows, and breaking into the Denver market's been really good for us. The gospel thing is cool in the extent that I can really connect with the gospel stuff, because a lot of times it's not really rock and roll. Some of it is. It's really cool. And I have to be careful with the gospel stuff, because the Elvis 70s rock music, there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of hip shaking, a lot of movements that you go through, the hand gestures and those kinds of things that he did. To where so the gospel stuff is I'm primarily standing there with my backup singers and the band behind me, and singing praises to God, and that's all good. But the rock stuff is a little bit more, because now you got the music. It's fast. You got beats that you got to be down on. The drummer's got to be watching your movements, so that when you do make a move, he's hitting the drum. And it's just a faster pace, and a lot of times there's a lot more words to remember. I wouldn't say either one is better than the other, because both of them have different highs for me. The movement of the rock and roll, the passion behind some of the tunes is great. It puts you in this really cool euphoria of a high, so to speak. The gospel stuff does the same, but on a different level. So if you're not a hymn person or a gospel or Christian music person, but yeah, you're having to perform it, may not be your best performance, because you're not going to be spiritually or emotionally into the song, so to speak. For me, the gospel songs, now when we do sit down and put together a gospel show, these are songs that I have to have an affection for, an emotional connection to. Because there are some, I mean, let's be honest, there are some gospel songs out there kind of dry. Hate saying that. And so those are going to be a little tougher to sing, particularly if you're going to do it in the original beat and instrumentation. But you can always spice everything up by adding a Wurlitzer or a Hammond organ or those kinds of things. But each one, rock or gospel, has its own different highs to it. But yeah, I guess it really depends on what you're comfortable with. And right now, I'm kind of comfortable with both. So growing up, my music influences came from my dad's albums. So we had Kingston Trio, Peter, Paul, and Mary. I think my silly humor on the morning show comes from the Smothers Brothers, and then of course Elvis. When I get into my teen years, start getting to the late '60s and '70s. Now it was groups like the Partridge Family. I think I can sing all their songs.
That's okay.
And then you get into some of the rock and roll. So Styx, REO Speedwagon, ELO were really big ones. Fleetwood Mac. Ooh. Not a big one on Rolling Stones. I kind of liked Aerosmith a little bit. And then as I got older, then I started getting into what I would call the amazing singers. And that is, of course, Billy Joel was one of them. But there was a band called the Guess Who. And there's a singer, he's Canadian, by the name of Burton Cummings. And this guy has a great voice. I mean, if I could sing like anybody, this guy had the range, he had the vibrato, and he just had the style. His music is just, I fit in very well with Burton Cummings' music, and of course, obviously, with Elvis. It'd be hard to be a Burton Cummings tribute artist, though, just because people would be going, who's that? And he doesn't wear these sexy jumpsuits either, so.